Hi, my name's Nikki. I'm the Obsessive Bookseller, and welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to review The Trouble with the Cursed. It's book 16 in the Hollow series by Kim Harrison, and to date, still one of my favorite urban fantasies on the market. I love spending time with Rachel Morgan. She's the main character, and these books are very much comfort reads for me. And oddly, they read more like a fantasy novel, like a slow burn fantasy novel, than they do the typical fast-paced action plots of most urban fantasies that I get into. And that's probably one of the reasons why I find the writing so comforting. She's very good at planning out the pacing of her reveals and her new nuggets of like lead-ins, things to keep you interested in finding out more. Those are all so carefully placed for me that I just find myself eating up the pages to find out what's going to happen next. And the series technically ended at book 13, and there was an epilogue. So we just kind of forget that the epilogue happened, and all of these books take place between the end of book 13 and that epilogue. These are like bonus books. She ended the series, tried some other things, didn't get as much good feedback as she wanted, so decided to continue writing in Rachel's world. And I have to say, these like revamped, haha, stories that she's telling are every bit as good as where we left off in the series, and if not better in some ways, because my favorite element of the entire series was the demons. And so anything to do with the demons, anything about finding out more about them, spending more time with them, like golden. I love it so much. And even at this point in the series, there's still enigmas, and I'm still trying to figure out where things are going with those plots. If I had one complaint about the previous book in the series is that it kind of petered out at the end. It didn't really end with a bang. This one, holy cow, in your face, one of the most satisfying book endings I've read all year long. And the awesome thing is I did some research, and it looks like there's going to be at least 2 more books in the series, so I've got a lot of awesome things to look forward to. So this was a solid read for me. There is one writing tool that I generally just really don't like that she used in this book, but it's the idea that there's some really important information that one character has that could really help the other character, but they are just so distraught and emotionally overcome to have a 2-minute conversation. Like, I just can't. Oh, it's just so overwhelmed. Like, that drives me crazy because it's a writing tool that I find not realistic in the slightest because it's used to perpetuate the conflict. And generally, I have found that people are really quick to talk about the things that really affected their lives, even in a traumatic way, if given the right opportunity and like the safety to talk about it. They're usually pretty free with the information. Like, sharing your story is part of the healing process. And I know there are a few like exemptions from that, but generally speaking, and especially considering the nature of the characters involved in this particular book, it just it was so contrived. It was just a tool to perpetuate the plot. And in this case, this 2-minute conversation could have saved 2 whole books of conflicts. Now, the reason I'm willing to give her a concession is because I actually really liked seeing the conflicts play themselves out. And so, like, I'm grateful for the time I spent reading about all of the things. But this is like maybe the one tiny, tiny exception to that rule is when your content is actually worth having things drug out. But it annoyed me enough that my rating is affected just slightly by that. I just wish there had been a better way to go about that. I mean, there's magic involved. Maybe make it so that they can't talk about it from some sort of magical ordinance or something. Just saying. Anyway, despite that, I still really enjoyed the book. One of my favorite things about the series as a whole is the intricate spell work scenes that we get. Like, we get really detailed, not ad nauseum, but just detailed, like, description of how to compose these different spells that Rachel does. And they are so cool. I love all the ingredients involved. I love, like, the mechanisms and how they put everything together. I don't know, I love it when people are really proficient at something, especially something that doesn't exist in our world, theoretically. So watching Rachel do spell work is probably one of my favorite aspects of the series, and I think it's done superbly. And while this isn't quite my favorite urban fantasy, my single favorite scenes and moments from any urban fantasy series has come from this one. Like, it may not be my favorite overall, but those key moments, oh, they just hit you. They are so good. With all that in mind, I'm landing at a 4 out of 5 star for this read, and I can't wait to continue on. I am really grateful that we're getting these what feels like bonus books in the Rachel Morgan Hollow series. Let's talk about other books you might like. So my all-time favorite urban fantasy, if not this one, is the Kate Daniels series by Ilona Andrews. Not this first book. This first book I did not enjoy very much. It was like a 2.5 star read. But the subsequent novels, and then by the time I hit the third book, oh my gosh, I loved it so much. And it just gets better and better from there. So if you like Rachel Morgan but want something a little more fast-paced, Kate Daniels is a really good comparison, especially if you like the integration of all the different types of supernatural beings. Ilona Andrews does those brilliantly. Nice Dragons finished last by Rachel Aaron. What I love most about this series, it's the Heartstrikers, is that it's a mashup feeling between a couple of different genres. So it's got a very urban fantasy telling, it's accessible as a YA book, but without all of the annoying tropes, but then it has a very strong fantasy element. And what the Hollow series does well, I think a lot of the elements feel more fantasy novel than they do urban fantasy, especially the further you get into it. And the writing style is very fantasy-esque as opposed to fast-paced urban fantasy. And this series did that pretty similarly for me. And I think you'll find some commonalities between side characters in Rachel's world, because few people do side characters as well as Kim Harrison, and a couple of the fun creations in this world. And to that end, Dark Currents by Jacqueline Carey, Agents of Hell. This is, like Kim Harrison, a really successful fantasy author first, who took her talents to some urban fantasy works. This is a trilogy, and this is another one that reads a little more fantasy than urban fantasy. And I really like the culture and the lore, and I found the main characters kind of a similar feel to both of them. If you've read the Kushiel stuff by Jacqueline Carey, this is absolutely nothing like that. You will find no similarities, no beautiful flowy writing, timepiece periods in here. This is just for pure fun, and I enjoyed it. What I call my gateway urban fantasy recommend, Mooncalled by Patricia Briggs, seems to have all the things that you would want from an urban fantasy, but in a very accessible manner. And these were just a lot of fun, and I felt like she's only getting stronger with time. The more you invest in this world, the more you get out of it. And this first book was just a lot of fun. Now, Kim Harrison started out as a fantasy writer with her Truth series, written as Dawn Cook. This is a slowly paced dragon story, and I loved it so much. One of my all-time favorites. Even on the reread, it was still so good. Kind of a told with a academic perspective, like a lot of book learning in here, lore, really good. I absolutely hate the new covers they've come out with. I think these old classic ones are so much better. And I did not care for the narrator of the audiobook, who I believe is the same narrator for the Rachel Morgan Hollow series. So I don't like the way she makes the men sound. They sound very immature, and especially in this case with like love interests, very hard to get behind. I will say, as dragon-tastic as this series is, there is a stronger romance element to it, so go in being prepared for that. But I love the way it was done. The world building in here is so cool. This is like, yeah, one of my favorites, so highly recommend. Oh, and there was a point in time when Kim Harrison was my favorite urban fantasy writer, and Dawn Cook was my favorite fantasy writer, and then I found out they were the same person. I did the same thing with James Corey and Daniel Abraham. These people are just so talented. And there you have it. I want to take a minute to thank my awesome patrons. Thank you so much for supporting my content. It really means the world to me. And yeah, thank you for joining me on this review. I've been really enjoying talking about urban fantasy titles lately, and so I'm sure you'll see a few more here and there mixed in throughout the regular content. They're excellent palate cleansers for me between other more dense reads. And I've got a goal, not to mention a huge backlist of titles that I already own that I'd like to make more progress with between now and the end of the year. Thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you next time. Bye.